Now we will talk about the human respiratory system. Now when you talk about the human respiratory system, there are quite a few organs which all together form this respiratory system in human beings. So let us quickly look at the different parts of the respiratory system. So the respiratory system consists of nostrils. So here you have your nostrils. The nasal cavity, like how you have oral cavity, like inside your mouth you can feel an open space, that is oral cavity. Similarly, inside your nose you can actually feel some open space like structure. So that is the nasal cavity. Then you have pharynx. So this was your nasal cavity. This portion is nasal cavity. This is your nose or nostril, whatever you call it. From the nasal cavity, you can feel this portion, which is pharynx. You remember while we talked about pharynx, we talked about three portions of pharynx: nasopharynx, oropharynx, and laryngopharynx. So nasopharynx is that portion of pharynx which lies just behind the nasal cavity. So this portion is nasopharynx. Now the part of pharynx which lies near the oral cavity, that is oropharynx, and the below portion of the pharynx is laryngopharynx. So here nasal, first is nostril, then nasal cavity, and then pharynx or nasopharynx, whatever you call it. Next is trachea. Trachea is this tube-like structure which you see here. So this is trachea. You see this tube-like structure? Right. Then you have the lungs. So these are the two lungs. So lungs occur in pairs. There is a right lung and a left lung. You have bronchi, bronchioles, and alveoli. Now this trachea which you see here, this trachea will enter both the lungs and they will branch off into thinner branches. So these branches are called bronchi. Then bronchi further divides into thinner branches called bronchioles, and the end of the bronchioles have small structures called alveoli. So all these structures together constitute the respiratory system, and when we breathe in, so the air actually reaches the alveoli through this path. Like first it reaches the nostrils, then it goes to nasal cavity, then pharynx, then trachea, then to bronchi, bronchioles, and finally the alveoli. And alveoli is the place where actual exchange of gases take place. That means this is the place where oxygen which is taken in is sent to the blood, and carbon dioxide which was a byproduct of cellular respiration comes from the blood to the alveoli. So once the carbon dioxide reaches the alveoli, alveoli is the part of lung. So once it reaches the alveoli means it reached the lungs, and then from alveoli it again follows the same path to be thrown out of the body through the nostrils. So now we will discuss about each of these parts in detail. So let us start our discussion with nostrils and nasal cavity. So let us look at nostrils and nasal cavity. So nostrils, they are the openings through which air is taken in. So if you look at your nose, you actually see two openings. So they are the nostrils. So there are fine hairs present there which filters the air which we take in. So you can actually observe the small hairs which are present in the nostrils. So they are used to filter, like whichever air we are taking in, whatever impurities or dirt is there, it actually tries to stop them. So in a way it is filtering the air which is being taken in. The next is nasal cavity. The way a mouth opens into oral cavity, in a very similar way nostrils open into the nasal cavity. So here this is a cavity where the air reaches through the nostrils. Now if you see here, you might see here that this is your mouth oral cavity and this is your nasal cavity. So the mouth cavity and the nasal cavity, they are separated by a bony plate. So here you look at this. This portion is a bony plate which separates the nasal cavity from the oral cavity. So again here in the nasal cavity, there is a central septum which separates the right and left air passages, dividing the two nostrils. So this is how the two nostrils look like. These are the two holes which you see in your nose. Now they are separated by a wall. This is known as the central septum. This wall in between, which you can feel it in your nose. So that is the central septum. The nasal passages are lined with ciliated epithelium and mucus. Now, why mucus and ciliated epithelium? Now, ciliated epithelium is the one which is lined with cilia, and cilia are again small hair-like structures. So, they also serve the same purpose. They help to block the dirt particles or microorganisms or any other germ, and thus they will prevent such foreign particles to reach the lungs. So that is how it will protect the respiratory system from any foreign particles. What about the mucus? Mucus is a slimy substance. It will actually help to moisten the air. So it will make the air more moist, and it also helps the air to move down. It is a slimy substance, as I said. So mucus and ciliated epithelium together help in filtering the air. So the nostrils and nasal cavity throughout is lined by small hair-like structures, either in the form of cilia or otherwise, which help in filtering the air. Because it is very, very important that we keep the respiratory system very well protected, because if some foreign particles get inside the respiratory system, so it can actually spoil the entire functioning of the body. So what happens is, air enters through the nostrils, they get warmed and moistened at the nasal cavity. So nostrils just act as the entrance, and the nasal cavity actually help to filter the air, to warm and moisten it with the help of mucus and the ciliated epithelium. Now after the nasal cavity comes the pharynx. So pharynx is the common passage for food and air. So as you see here, this part is pharynx. Now even in this part, it is divided into three parts. The part just behind the nasal cavity is nasopharynx. That portion of pharynx which is just behind the oral cavity, that is called oropharynx. And the portion of pharynx which is near the larynx is known as the laryngopharynx. And so all these three together is termed as pharynx. So pharynx is the common passage for food and air. So whatever we eat goes into the oral cavity, and whatever air we breathe goes into the nasal cavity. But both of them open into the pharynx. But again, from pharynx they go downward, and then again they get divided into two tubes. Air gets into the windpipe, that is the trachea, and food gets into the esophagus, that is the food pipe. So if you see here, this brown colored tube like structure, that is esophagus, which opens into stomach. So that basically takes you to the digestive system, whereas this trachea which you see here, this takes you to the lungs, that is, this takes the air to the respiratory system. Now enough care should be taken that food should not get into the windpipe, because windpipe cannot manage food, and once food enters into the windpipe, it can actually cause choking and it can lead to death. So now food goes to the esophagus and air goes into the trachea. So trachea lies in front of esophagus, as you can see in this picture. Esophagus is just behind the trachea. Now the question is, as I said, that food should not enter into the trachea. So who prevents Who prevents food from entering into trachea? So for that we have a cartilaginous structure known as epiglottis. So here if you see, here you have a brown colored structure like this here. Right? So this structure is nothing but it is like a flap kind of a structure which remains closed all the time, and it opens only when air has to pass through the trachea. So this covering actually protects food from entering into the trachea. So it is a small cartilaginous flap of skin. So it is a very small flap. So it prevents food from entering the respiratory tract. Now, if by any chance food enters into the respiratory tract, you would have often seen, right, that while eating, if you are eating very hastily or you are eating very fast or something, sometimes food gets stuck in your throat, somewhere near your throat, and you suddenly start to cough. So even that happens when a minute particle tries to get inside your trachea and you suddenly start to feel suffocation. So when you actually start coughing, that coughing actually brings out that food material outside, and as a result your respiratory tract is not damaged. But in case the food gets into the respiratory tract, it can lead to death. So epiglottis perform a very vital function without which there will be a lot of confusion. The food and the air, they will not know which way to go. Now, since both food and air, both of them have a common passage, that is the pharynx. That is why you would have often see that if somebody closes your, if you try to press your nostrils really hard such that the two nostril openings get closed, what happens? After a few seconds, you feel like suffocating. So what do? You start breathing by your mouth. So you open your mouth and take in air. So that is possible because when you take in air even by your mouth, the air actually goes into the pharynx. But why do we prefer not to breathe by our mouth? That is because the nasal cavity and the nostrils, they have cilia and small hairs as well as a mucus which actually helps in filtering the air. So all those things are missing in our oral cavity, because oral cavity